Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Dolphin Financial Radio Show where we talk weekly about different financial topics, particularly focused on retirement planning. But today's topic is going to be about ladybird deeds. Have you heard of these? A lot of people in Florida have. Very popular here, and it's a show that I've been wanting to do for years, and I finally got a chance to do it. And when I say got a chance to do it, I mean I wanted to get someone with experience and info and expertise about these types of things, ladybird deeds, and how they can be used to transfer your home to the next generation. And who am I going to bring on to that? There he is, Steve Nino. Thanks for joining us again. We've been talking about enhanced planning topics, and I mentioned to you that ladybird deeds is a very, very popular topic to my clients. And I thought, well, why not we do a show on it? And you agreed.
Yep. That sounds great.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dan.
You're one of the few people that I know that can get as excited as I am to talk about ladybird deeds.
Yeah, right. Yep.
So the listeners are in for a treat, and the viewers. Steve, why don't you just start us off by explaining what is a ladybird deed?
Okay. A ladybird deed is actually a legal form of ownership, and it's a way of transferring property basically without the probate process. So it bypasses any property that is in title of the ladybird deed will stay out of the probate process and pass directly to the remainder beneficiaries listed in the deed document.
So we've done several shows. I'll put the show up here for the viewers on YouTube to watch. It was talking about how titling assets is a great way to avoid a lot of headaches, expense, keep it private by just naming people as a beneficiary. And so this is a way to do that by naming someone on a deed. And I say it's popular in Florida because it's not available in every state. I looked it up recently just to give you an idea. There was about 5 or 6 states that ladybird deeds are valid. Florida being one of them, Texas, Michigan. So if you're watching this and you're wondering, hey, is this available in my state? Take a look and make sure you look it up because doesn't apply everywhere. But also known as enhanced life estate deeds. So what is that? What's an enhanced life estate deed?
That's a real good question and one that's important to know the answer to. An enhanced life estate is different from a typical life estate. If you set up a life estate for someone, generally what that means is the grantor, the person who established that, can live on the land or live in the house, whatever's in that life estate. They can use it while they're alive, but they are subject to making sure it's still there so that the remainder people, the beneficiaries, can then take over and have that. A life estate really requires, if I set up a life estate and I'm living in my house, I put the house in there, and then I want to sell the house, I have to check with the beneficiaries first. Okay. Whereas an enhanced life estate allows the grantor, in my case, my example, me, to sell, mortgage, move, do whatever I want with that house without the beneficiaries, the remainder beneficiaries, reining in on that. So it is true control over whatever you put in an enhanced life estate deed. And also it is pretty much synonymous with ladybird deed. So the terms can be mixed and kind of interchanged. Ladybird deed is an enhanced life estate.
So a life estate, you would lose some control, but an enhanced life estate, you still maintain some control.
Correct. And there's only a few states that allow enhanced life estate deeds or ladybird deeds, and Florida is one of them.
Excellent. So I mentioned the key benefit of using a ladybird deed is to avoid probate because, correct me if I'm wrong, if I name someone on the deed, ladybird deed, and I pass away, and let's say originally it was my wife and we both pass away. We named each other, but I'm now single or widower, and now I have a ladybird deed and I name my 3 children. If I pass away, that does not go through the probate process, even though my will or my other assets are given away differently. A deed is a contract type of legal document that we talked about in that show.
That's right. That's right. Dan, you nailed it. In our previous show, we talked about the different types of ownership, and contract, meaning it has a beneficiary listed. So that will bypass the probate process. At that time, we talked about things like life insurance, annuities, and IRAs with a beneficiary designation on it. Well, think of it this way: the ladybird deed has a beneficiary on it. So in essence, it's almost like a contract. But I think the big distinguishing feature is that that enhanced life estate, which allows the person who puts the house or whatever it is into this ladybird deed, they can still sell it and do whatever they want with it without being subject to approval by the remainder beneficiaries, the people inheriting after they're gone.
Now, if I have a bank account and I have transfer on death or payable on death, that bypasses probate because it's a named beneficiary. How is that different than just having a TOD, transfer on death, on a house? Can you, on a deed, is this the same thing?
Dan, that's a real good question. TOD is the same thing, really, in essence. The problem is Florida and a few states do not allow transfer on death arrangements as we see them in many other states. And so that's where the genesis or the beginning of these ladybird deeds came into existence. They basically are a type of deed with a transfer on death embedded inside of them. So you don't get TOD in Florida, but you can get a ladybird deed or an enhanced life estate.
Excellent. So those watching may not be in Florida, say, oh, I'll just do a transfer on death with my deed and that's going to work. But in Florida or certain other states, not so fast. You need to do it in this procedure, and it may be functioning the same way, just different procedures, as it were. Quick question though, and this is what I get a lot on. Steve, why wouldn't I just add my child to the deed while I'm alive so that I don't even have to worry about a ladybird deed. They're on it. So it's a joint with rights of survivorship. What's the harm in doing it that way?
Well, generally, when you set up a joint ownership arrangement with a child during your lifetime, you're going to have some gifting scenarios. I mean, if let's just say I have a piece of property that's worth $100,000, and then I set up a joint account at the titling office with my son. Well, my son now owns 50%, so we have to take $50,000 and record that as a gift. That's half of the 100,000 that it is. And there's some gifting. There's also some losing control over it. If he gets in trouble or something, their creditors can come after his share of that.
Which would be half of your house if your son got in a car accident.
Precisely.
He's half on the deed and there's equity there?
Precisely.
Okay. So this is a word of warning to people. Hey, don't go down the path of just putting your son or daughter on the deed while you're alive to avoid this. Why not just do a ladybird deed? It's much cleaner. And you might have multiple children. So wouldn't it be better to put multiple children on a ladybird deed versus just one of them on the deed now? You don't lose control. And that's a key part of ladybird deed, if I recall, is you still live there. It's still your house, still your property. You maintain ownership and rights. It's not until you die that the ladybird deed actually takes effect.
Exactly. And I think there's an important point in that maybe we should uncover is that because of that control and because you have all that enhanced life estate, you as grantor, a person living on the property, are subject to creditors and things like that. That money or whatever it is, house or property that's inside the ladybird deed, can be accessed by creditors. there's really no asset protection feature to it. However, for the remainder, they are typically not going to have any problem with creditors and things like that, because technically they don't take ownership until the grantor passes away, until they die.
Excellent. So you maintain control, which means you're still liable for everything that goes with it. But by eliminating putting them on the deed while you're alive and just using a ladybird deed, it only goes to them when you pass away. So they don't have any rights or ability to do anything or creditor any linkage to them until you pass away, which is a good way to keep control, right? And then pass it on. It's just basically you're naming a beneficiary on your house in Florida using a ladybird deed.
Right.
One point I want to make that's specific to ladybird deeds, which I don't know if this is for all enhanced life estates, is in Florida, we have a homestead exemption for taxes and legal issues. And also if someone's trying to qualify for government aid in the form of state Medicaid, their assets are looked at. There's a 5-year look back period and such. That those don't apply in Florida with a ladybird deed, meaning you could still have your tax exemption and your Medicaid qualification with a ladybird deed because you actually haven't given it to anybody yet, technically.
That's right. And Dan, there's another element to that whole thing that is a little bit positive from a Medicaid planning purposes, is that because the ladybird deed does bypass the probate process, it doesn't end up being determined by a court as to where it should go. That can be sometimes keep it away from the counting towards Medicaid, what your assets and what your income is, because it's not part of the probate estate where they typically look. So it can be a win-win. It can be a win during your lifetime by maintaining the homestead exemption in Florida, and it can be a win when it passes to your remainder beneficiaries outside of the probate process and keeps it out of that view, so to speak.
So to summarize on the benefits, you just mentioned that Medicaid estate recovery is one. So it doesn't go through probate, so it wouldn't go through Medicaid estate recovery if,
Precisely.
hey, you spent a lot and now we're going to claw back some assets.
Precisely.
Avoids probate. That was the first one I said. Taxes. You touched upon this. So if you give the property while you're alive to someone, there may be some gift, that's gifting, right? Mm-hmm. So that may be some estate taxes as well. How does a ladybird deed deal with the taxation?
Well, when you name, as opposed to making a gift, and then, let's just give a simple example. Dan, what if I had that $100,000 piece of property and I made a gift? I said, you can have half of it, Dan. Well, then you've just you've gotten $50,000 from me. So I would have to record that at year end. I'd either have to write that down on my my tax forms to say I'm applying this against my lifetime gifting, or I would pay taxes on gift taxes on the $50,000, which I wouldn't like to do. So there's just that. It's more of an administrative thing to be cognizant of, is that if you give money, give assets or split assets during your lifetime with other people, there is gift consequences. And then not to mention the loss of control and the concern over creditors and things like that. If you and I, because I know, Dan, you're a troublemaker. And if I gave you half of that, I'm just kidding.
Well, also, your children may be in a situation when they don't want that, or you may have significant assets and you don't want to do that at this point. You want to wait.
Right.
But it brings up another point. And on here, I say expensive legal trust creation. What about a living trust versus a ladybird deed?
What's
the difference here?
Yeah, I oftentimes just say, if it's just the house you're concerned about, then ladybird deed works fine. If you have more complexity, if there's other assets, other things in your, maybe you have a boat, maybe you have a shore house, a beach house, then you might want to talk about a living trust. Living trust is going to be a little more expensive to set up. Ladybird deeds, I think, go for around 350 for the whole kit and caboodle, whereas a living trust can be in the thousands or more. So kind of, it goes up with the complexity whether or not you're going to need a living trust.
And if you have a living trust, we said, and we did a show on trusts. I'll put that up here. Do you need a living trust? Do I need a trust? What are they? What are they good for? And if you have one, you got to remember the key thing is don't forget to put your assets in it. So you could have a trust for and not put your house in it, and just because you forget. But if you want, you can not have a trust and have the house go into the Ladybird deed scenario where you don't necessarily need a trust. You don't necessarily even need a lawyer to have a Ladybird deed. You do need to file it with the county, with the local state government. You can't just name it and put it in your drawer. It's got to be registered somewhere. So that's a mistake that people might make. But in general, though, if you just said, if all you have is your IRA with a named beneficiary, you have a banking account with a transfer on death, you have a home with a Ladybird deed, and maybe some other assets, maybe your car, do you really need to get a trust? And is a Ladybird deed a really powerful way for those that don't have a lot to avoid having complicated legal issues in an inexpensive way?
Dan, I think I'd say yes to what you just described. And here are a couple of things that people should be aware of. There are some administrative things. It's not just going to magically happen if I say I'm going to create a Ladybird deed. First of all, in the actual execution or the creation of a Ladybird deed, you need 2 witnesses and you need a notary. So you could do this. You could get a form offline. I'm sure there's plenty of sites that have a Ladybird deed form. However, if you're one like me who likes to dot their I's and cross their T's and make sure that it's absolutely being done in the right way, I think the money you spend for a law firm to help you out and make sure it's done correctly is well worth it.
And just to answer questions while you're going through the process, because
exactly.
it's probably your biggest asset, dollar for dollar.
Exactly.
So you wanted to do it correctly, and this might be a good way to avoid expensive trust creation, but it doesn't mean you have to avoid talking to a lawyer to help you with it at all.
Right.
One thing I want to talk about, which is a potential issue, I want to get your take on it. This is something that I've identified when I was thinking about it in my situation, because I have 3 older brothers. If my father puts the house in a Ladybird deed in Florida, and he lists us all equally, multiple beneficiaries, which he could do with you can name multiple beneficiaries. That is different than if he had a trust and named one trustee to make the decisions, picked one of the 4 sons to make the decisions. With a Ladybird deed, and he names us equally, now we have a decision to make when my father passes away, and there's 4 of us deciding what to do with this house. Is that an issue?
It all depends on the family, Dan. You're right. That's something you probably want to nip at the bud and avoid that concern. So if that is a concern and you have many beneficiaries in a family, well, then you might want to be as clear as possible. And that's probably by using a trust, a living trust or a revocable trust. You can actually spell out that, the kids are to sell the house and split the house proceeds, or one child gets the house, the other child gets other assets to equalize. So there's ways with trusts that you can create harmony, as opposed to, you're right, with a Ladybird trust, you leave it to them and there's really no delineation or spelling out of how that's going to be split up or distributed.
You hit on that word every show. You say the word harmony because it's a biggie. If you have 3 children, or say 2 children, one of them which is living with you, taking care of you, and you ladybird deed 50-50, you're going to force those children to make a decision as to, hey, I'm living here, I want to stay here. But if the other daughter says, no, we're selling that, I need the cash, that's going to be a fight. Could be avoided with a trust. A living trust might be a better way. So I agree. I think that's a good point. Let's conclude here. Very simplistic. I mean, it's one document. It's inexpensive. You know, you could do it yourself, or you can hire a lawyer to just kind of oversee it, a couple $100. And could pass your biggest asset, your home, onto the next generation very clearly and without any drama.
Right.
But it does have some flaws. It's not available in all states. So make sure you double check to make sure this is even something relevant for you, but it's worth considering. And I think more and more people, at least with my clients who ask about it now, I'm going to send them here to watch this show. I think it might be a really powerful way to help people out, particularly where it's valid in the states that it's valid.
Correct.
Any final thoughts on ladybird deeds? Do you know where it got its name? How about that? That's an interesting.
You did go for it, Dan. Yeah,
I did. Because I thought I didn't know how to spell it. Was it Lady BYRD, whatever? Turns out some lawyer, I forget his name, I think in Florida, was doing educational seminars or content on the concept of this enhanced life estate, and he was using Lyndon Johnson and his wife Lady Bird as the example, and the name just stuck.
Sure.
So that could be folklore. I don't have the truth on that, but I think that's what it is.
That's good. I hadn't really dug onto that one, but I'm glad you did.
So what do you think, Steve? This is Lady Bird. Thumbs up on using it, or
absolutely
one of these, do-it-yourself ideas that we should stay away from?
No, I think this one's pretty darn good. It's because Florida doesn't have the transfer on death, which most of the states are using. So basically, you're using the next best thing, if not better, the enhanced life estate or ladybird deed. And so, yeah, I like it.
Steve, as always, thank you for your time. This is an excellent show. We'll have more on new topics. Listeners, if you want to talk about a legal question that is burning you, give us a call. We'll maybe incorporate it and get Steve's opinion. So thanks, everyone. Enjoy the rest of the week.
All matters discussed in today's show are for informational purposes only.
This show is not investment advice.
Dan Wendol nor Dolphin Financial Group are affiliated or endorsed by any government agency.
Investment advisory services are offered through Dolphin Wealth Management, Inc., a registered investment advisor in the state of Florida.
Insurance products and services are offered through Dolphin Insurance, Inc.
Dolphin Wealth Management, Inc. and Dolphin Insurance, Inc. are affiliated companies doing businesses as Dolphin Financial Group.
You should talk to someone at Dolphin Financial Group before implementing any of these strategies or ideas.